told you I was going to give you a secret every class, something I've learned along the way. The secret to happiness: low expectations. You walk in here and you're expecting a great show, you're going to be disappointed. Does that make sense? But when you walk in here and you're like, oh, this is going to suck, you have a much higher probability of being satisfied with the outcome. Does that make sense? By the way, low expectations is also the secret to a long marriage. Right? My wife has low expectations, and I have been living up to them every single day of our 32 years of marriage. Okay, so on with the story. By the way, BSG AI, did you guys see what I posted? I posted a deal about how, if you want to try to use AI to help with the BSG, you can. And I give you some starter tips. But if you use it, you need to remember that you're going to have to present about how you used it, what you put into it, what you got out of it, and then also whether or not you took all of its advice. By the way, should you take all of AI's advice?
No.
Why not?
Because it could be inaccurate, hallucinating.
Yeah, it could be hallucinating. It could be high as a kite, just like those guys I worked with in Louisiana. Now, as far as I can recall, we had finished up with number 4, appeal of celebrities endorsing the company's brand. It was on page 11 of the guide. Is that correct? Okay, so are all celebrities equally attractive in every region? No. And so it makes sense to be picky about who you go after, or at least think strategically about who you're going after. Now we're on to image and brand reputation. The image rating for each company in the industry is based on 1, its global average branded SQ rating, number 2, average market share of total footwear sales, which includes sales of both branded and private label footwear across the 4 geographic regions, and its actions to display corporate citizenship and conduct operations in a socially responsible manner over the past 4 to 5 years, for a total of 3 factors. What's the goal of financial management?
Shareholder value.
What about it?
Increases.
Maximize shareholder value. You said increase, you said maximize. So here's you go see how crappy I'm at throwing. Are you ready? Yep, see, told you. That can be yours, Mr. Barentine. Okay, Mr. Bardwash, here we go. We're going to try again. Sweet, good catch. Okay, now let's think about this. When you're displaying corporate citizenship from the perspective of maximizing shareholder wealth, if your actions toward displaying corporate citizenship do not improve shareholder wealth, should you be doing them? No. And the same thing is with the socially responsible, how did they put that? Socially behave in a socially responsible manner. Okay, now, does that mean that you should be out there, like polluting and like wiping out villages of indigenous people? No, right? That's not good. But when you get into these situations where companies are trying to signal virtue, how does that typically work out for them?
Not well.
Not well. Anybody know who Dylan Mulvaney is?
For Bud Light.
Yeah, the person that basically killed Bud Light. Bud Light was the #1 beer brand in America. Is that still true? No. What about Target? First, Target was excessively joyous about Pride Month, and some people took exception to that. And then they said, well, we're not going to do our DEI thing anymore. And so then another group of people boycotted them. And so they just, one thing after another, they are just stepping in mud over and over again. So you got to be careful when you do these things in the real world. Now, I will tell you this, in the game, I have never seen anybody win as a result of doing these things that are described in number 5. So let's talk about the first two there, and then the SQ rating. Does that help you otherwise to have a high SQ rating? Yes. How about having a high global average market share of footwear sales? Is that good? Yes. And so there are two of the three things that you can do there to help your image and brand reputation that are not going to potentially basically just cost you money for no gain. Image ratings, brand reputations are updated at the end of each year using that year's global average SQ ratings, year-end global market shares of total footwear sales, and information related to the social responsibility of the rival companies. Let's see. Prior year company image ratings of rival companies will have a moderately strong influence on the brand choices of footwear buyers in the upcoming 12 months. So in other words, if you've got a good image, people are more likely to buy your shoes than if you had a bad image. But you notice it says moderately strong. It's not a dead giveaway. Thus, companies with prior year average ratings above the industry average have a meaningful edge over rivals with below average image ratings in attracting buyers to purchase their brand. And that lasts for a period of 1 year. Of course, then the new ratings are released, and if in the meantime you screwed something up, you lose out. The importance of a strong brand reputation in attracting buyers is big enough that companies with comparatively weak reputations must exert extra effort on the other 12 competitively relevant factors to boost overall buyer appeal for their brand and overcome their image reputation disadvantage. Now, here's the trick. One of those 12 things is the SQ rating, right? And that's going to feed, so if you improve that, that's going to feed back into your image rating. And then another one was the market share. If you are making a more compelling product, you will gain market share, so you will gain. So there's some feedback, but what they're saying is it's going to take a bit to get back. When weak image companies significantly improve their overall buyer appeal and competitiveness of their athletic footwear from 1 year to the next, they can win market share from strong image rivals despite having an image rating disadvantage. In other words, if you improve, you don't have to be beating the other people, but if you improve, you're still going to gain. Should companies with once weak brand reputations continue to improve their overall image ratings over a period of several years, they can turn the liability of a weak brand reputation into a strong brand reputation and competitive asset. Okay, so there are a couple of things here that you need to keep in mind, and I don't think we saw it here, but we will. And that is that these corporate social responsibility-ish things that you do, they have to be an ongoing effort to be effective. So you can't just do something this year and then say, okay, I'm good. It has to be something that continues. And by the way, do these things cost money? Absolutely, they cost money. And so you have to commit to spending that money year after year after year. Sometimes students approach the corporate responsibility thing as a residual. They're like, well, if we have any money left, we'll go out and signal our virtue. That's not going to benefit you. It has to be a sustained effort. And what does that also mean? It means you're not going to get the benefit of that for like the first 3 years that you're investing in it. You're not going to get the benefit. So you only start getting the benefit down the road. Now, from everything I've told you so far, are you interested in investing in this corporate social responsibility stuff? I wouldn't. And now I have seen people win that did it, but it was because they were overall so strong in other areas, it wouldn't have mattered. They could have destroyed a village in the Amazon and still would have won. Now, I'm not telling you to destroy a village in the Amazon. That's not right. But, okay, so let's see. And the other thing is there are no magic bullets to fix a weak reputation. Once again, and they mentioned several. It's going to be several years in order to fix a weak reputation. So what should you do? Well, from the beginning, focus on the things you can control, and one of those things is the SQ rating. Can you totally control your SQ rating? Yeah, you do from the features and from your superior materials. There are like 5 things that go into that, and of course we'll talk about each of them again, but that's something you can control. Okay, now we're on to the 5 factors that impact only wholesale sales of branded footwear to retailers. So far, everything that we've looked at here affects both internet and wholesale sales. And so it's whether you're selling it online or to Foot Locker, these all matter. Now, these are things that only matter when you're selling to people like Foot Locker. First of all, we've got the average wholesale price for branded footwear sold to retailers. How your company's average wholesale price for branded footwear in each region compares to the wholesale price of competing companies is a important competitive factor. Do your prices to your retailers have to be the same in every region? No, you can have different prices. And is that going to be a problem? Is that going to be held against you? No. I'll give you an example. So in the United States, Mercedes-Benz, is that considered a regular ass car or a luxury car? That's a luxury car. If you spent much time in Europe at all and you call a taxi cab, what shows up? A Mercedes. And you're like, ooh, I feel special. And then you get in and it's got windows that crank and it's just a regular car, right? Now, they can sell those cars cheaper in Germany, and American buyers are not upset that you can buy a Mercedes. And my number's way out of date, but I remember you could buy one for $17,000 in Europe and you'd be spending $30,000 here. And so there was a big difference. It doesn't damage their sales here. And so don't worry if you're selling in one market at a much lower price. What matters is how are you competing against the other team in that same region. Okay, charging a higher price puts you at a disadvantage. That makes sense. The more important price-related consideration affecting a company's unit sales market share is the amount by which its wholesale price to retailers in each region is above, below the all-company average in each geographic region. And so it doesn't really matter what your absolute price is, it's how you compare to your competitors, which is absolutely the way it works in the real world. Okay. The rest of that's pretty explanatory. So they're talking about these price differences. And remember last time we talked about ceteris paribus. It's Latin. Does anyone remember what it means?
All else equal.
All else equal. Can you catch? Okay. Remember, it means all else equal. I've got more. Don't worry. All else equal. And so what we're saying here is all else equal, if your price is below the average, then you'll do better. However, your price might be below the average because you're using crappy materials and you've got all sorts of problems and you've got an unattractive product. That is not all else equal. So all else equal means your SQ rating is the same, your model's features, everything else is the same except for the price. So that's what's going on there. Low price alone won't attract droves of buyers when a company's footwear brand does not compare favorably with rival brands on other important factors that affect the preferences of footwear buyers for one brand versus another. It's important to understand that the size of the company's pricing disadvantage or advantage versus rivals and the resulting loss or gain in unit sales market share can be decreased or increased by its competitive standing versus rivals on other competitive factors. So, if you roll back to when you guys were little kids, Target and Walmart, which one's cheaper? Walmart. How did Target manage to compete? You actually have an upcoming discussion over this. How did Target manage to compete even though they had higher prices? Okay, they are better at marketing. What else? Yeah, so they've got better quality goods, and as one of my students at Mizzou said, their stuff is cuter, right? So they had a design edge. They had to have some other edge in order to be able to compete. And so it's okay not to be the price leader if you are leading on these other things. Another thing, when you start thinking about strategies, when you look to compete with someone, should you be doing exactly the thing that they are? No. So take a look at Walmart. I remember in the late 90s, my father-in-law said, Walmart is going to control everything. I said, if you truly believe that, you should sell everything you own and buy Walmart stock, right? But then someone comes along and starts to compete with Walmart. Who's the big competitor now? Amazon. Did they compete with Walmart by building brick and mortar stores? No, they've competed with them by doing something new and different. And then how does Walmart now compete with Amazon? Is it that they're doing the same thing that Amazon's doing? No, they've got where you drive up and pick up your groceries. Have you guys tried that? Oh man, you gotta try it, Mr. Volker. So, you know when you go in Walmart and you see all those people in their pajama pants that look like they're high? If you pick it up outside, you don't have to deal with them. It's amazing. And I have yet to see anyone change a diaper out there where they're delivering the groceries, but I have seen people changing diapers inside the store. So there's another bonus for picking up. Well, anyway, so that's, frankly, I'm like, how the hell is Walmart going to compete? But then they started doing that, and I went, whew, that's pretty sweet. Now, and then you think about, so Target. How's Target competing with Amazon? Not well. They're doing it, they're trying to make each of their stores into a fulfillment center. In fact, the last time I taught this in a seated class, one of my students was working at Target fulfilling orders. And he said a couple of things. Number one, they suck at it. And he didn't like the job. And number two is it really messes with the store. Because if they order stuff and they have to go out and pull it off the shelves, what does that mean for the available stock for the local shoppers? It's not there, right? And so we're seeing that there are different ways you can compete, and you can definitely hurt yourself if you choose poorly. Let's see. The further a company's average price to retailers is above the average prices of rival companies, the harder it is for the company to use non-price enticements to overcome rising buyer resistance to the company's higher price footwear. You may think you have shoes made of gold, and they may be amazing shoes, but there is a limit to how much you'll be able to charge for those and still sell them. By the way, can you set the price to whatever you want? Yeah. Does that mean anyone's got to buy them? No. Next one, the further a company's price is below the average being charged by the regional rivals, the easier it is to offset any competitive advantages relating to a less attractive SQ rating. In other words, if you've got other problems, a lower price can help to rebalance the competition. The number of retailers carrying the company's brand. So what do you think would be better? More retail outlets carrying your brand or fewer? More, right? You want to have your shoes wherever, Coca-Cola says they always want to have people within like arm's length of being able to get their hands on a Coke. Your shoes aren't necessarily like that, but it's the same idea. You'd like to have them as many places as you can. The number of retailers in a region desirous of carrying a company's brand in an upcoming year is based on 4 factors. Number 1, the company's market share of branded footwear sales in that region. So success begets success. I've got a higher market share. More people are going to be willing to carry my shoes. What is that going to do to my market share in the next year? All else equal, it's going to push it up. Number 2, it's regional SQ rating for branded footwear. Number 3, the number of weeks it takes for retailers in the region to receive pairs they have ordered. Now, we talked about this earlier. What are people going to want? Shorter times or longer times? Shorter times, but shorter times cost more money. And number 4, the degree of merchandising support that the company provides to regional retailers stocking its brand of footwear. Finance majors often underestimate the importance of retailer support. They underestimate the importance of hiring salespeople. They underestimate the support of the spending on marketing. So watch out for those things. Number 3, the number of weeks it takes to deliver orders. While retailers can easily live with a 4-week delivery time on footwear orders, manufacturers can boost the appeal of their brands and more easily convince retailers to carry their brands by cutting the delivery times on orders of footwear retailers to 3 weeks, 2 weeks, or 1 week. Companies whose delivery times in a region are shorter than the all-company average, once again this is a ceteris paribus argument, have an advantage in attracting footwear retailers to stock their brand and boosting sales because retailers are less likely to run out of particular sizes and styles. You guys ever gone to the shoe store and you see a shoe you really like and then you start and they don't have it in your size? So it's, first of all, that kind of pisses you off, right? The second thing is that's what we call a stock out. That's not a good thing. And we're going to talk about what the downsides to stock outs are. However, shorter delivery times require footwear companies to incur higher shipping costs and maintain higher inventories to ensure having all sizes of its various models and styles on hand in the region's distribution center. In other words, the shorter your delivery time, the higher your costs are going to be. So it's a trade-off. Support offered to retailers in merchandising and promoting the company's brand. Support can include providing in-store displays and signage, providing helpful information about styles, models, performance features, supplying brochures detailing shoe construction and other noteworthy features, making it easy for retailers to place orders online, and keeping retailers posted on styles or models that had been newly introduced, discontinued, or about to be introduced, discontinued. In short, footwear retailers and their store personnel want to deal with a footwear supplier that works closely with them to boost sales and that is easy to do business with. Companies that provide amounts of retailer support above the all-company average have an advantage. So once again, it's that ceteris paribus argument. I can tell you this one with certainty. When I was in sales, I was located in Cuyahoga Falls, Ohio, and my biggest client was just down the road in a little place called Berlin, Ohio. It's spelled like Berlin, but it's pronounced Berlin. And I actually took the business away from some people in South Carolina. And one of the ways I was able to take that business away was that I could jump in my company vehicle and be down there in 30 minutes. And anytime they had a problem, bam, I was there. My competitors in South Carolina couldn't do that. And so because of that extra customer support, I actually got more sales out of them. So it's a real thing. Now, mail-in rebates. Does anybody actually do mail-in rebates anymore? I don't think so, but they're included here in the game. So the idea is that in order to get your money, they say they don't just reduce the price, that you have to mail in and you get, $2, $5, whatever back in the mail. When cross-rival differences on all the other factors that influence buyer demand are on balance quite small, companies offering bigger than average mail-in rebates in the wholesale segment will outsell companies offering smaller than average mail-in rebates or no rebates. Once more, it's a ceteris paribus argument. If you're doing everything else right and the only thing you're not doing is mail-in rebates, chances are you're still going to be beating the pants off someone else that really stinks but offers mail-in rebates. The three competitive factors that impact only internet sales. So we started out talking about 5 things that affect both, and then we talked about 5 things that affect your wholesale sales, and now we're going to talk about 3 competitive factors that only impact the internet. The first is the average retail price charged at each company's regional websites. So once again, if your price is higher, you're going to do worse. If your price is lower than average, you're going to do better. But the more important price-related consideration affecting a company's online sales market in each is the difference by which its average online selling price in each region is above or below the all-company average. So in other words, it's exactly like everything else we've talked about, except for we're going to talk about there is a danger with your online pricing, because when we talked about this a little bit last time, what happens if you price your shoes too cheaply online? What does that happen to your retailer's willingness to carry your stuff?
Destroys it.
Yeah, so we're going to have to talk about how to avoid that problem. Then there's search engine advertising. Athletic footwear companies use search engine ads to attract more footwear buyer traffic to their websites. Free shipping on online purchases. By the way, is free shipping free? Somebody pays for the free shipping. And the question is, does this price that I'm asking include the shipping or not? If it does include the shipping, then that's part of the money that I received from the sale, I'm going to have to put towards shipping. Footwear companies have the option to offer free shipping. Companies that offer free shipping to buyers in a geographic region enjoy an advantage in securing online sales versus regional rivals that choose not to offer free shipping. However, advantage is weakened when companies offering free shipping they have higher online prices more than enough to cover the cost of free shipping, and/or their footwear carries a lower SQ rating and their selections more limited. In other words, the other competitive factors. So likewise, rivals that choose to offer not free shipping can offset by, doing some of the other stuff better. And so it's just like anything else. It's ceteris paribus. All else equal, if you offer free shipping, you'll get more business, but you keep in mind that there's a cost to it. So once again, everything is a trade-off. Pardon me. The importance of each competitive factor in determining sales and market share. So we've got 13 competitive factors here as a general rule. The three most important are, what are they here? The price, you might underline these, the price, SQ ratings, and the number of models, styles offered. If they're telling you those are the most three important things, should you put more time into thinking about those things when you make your decisions? Absolutely. The next most, let's see. So then it's price, SQ ratings, and number of models. The next most influential factor, so this is the second tier. The appeal of celebrities endorsing the rival brands, brand advertising, search engine advertising, company image, brand reputation, the number of retail outlets stocking the company's branded footwear, and free shipping. So that's the next tier down. The competitive advantages and disadvantages associated with the difference in the number of weeks it takes to deliver retailer orders, the size of mail-in rebates, and the comparative amounts of support to retailers in their brand markets weigh least heavily in determining buyer brand preferences. So that tells you, where should you be putting, if you have $1 to spend, should you be putting it into improving your SQ or putting it into mail-in rebates?
SQ.
Yeah, the SQ is one of the top three, right? While knowing precisely what these weights are might seem helpful or even essential, such knowledge is not as useful as you might believe, which we explain below. And it really boils down to basically the same thing we've been saying all along, and that is what matters is how much different from the average you are. How much different from the average you are. And so if everybody is really hitting it big time on those top three, you're really not going to gain any competitive advantage of that. So you're going to have to find your competitive advantage elsewhere where people aren't investing as heavily. And so that's what that next bit's about. Let's see, next page. When a company's competitive effort on each of the relevant competitive factors in the wholesale or internet market segments for branded footwear approximates the all-company averages in a region, then the resulting unit sales volume market share in those two segments will also approximate the all-company sales market share averages. In other words, if you're doing exactly the same thing as someone else, you're going to have the same market share as that same team. Luckily, we only have two teams in here, so if you guys are doing exactly the same thing, you will have exactly the same market share. All the outcomes result from your choices and those of your competitors. Once again, this is what really happens in business. So then we have the special note here, and it says, after each year's decision round, you can review a competitive intelligence report. It's imperative that you review this information to determine how well your company's competitive effort stacked up against all company averages, on which factors did your company have a competitive advantage on, and which was a disadvantage. Ignoring, boy, do you see they put this in bold? Ignoring information in the competitive intelligence report puts your company into the risky position of heading into the upcoming year's market contest with little or no clue as to the competitors' prior year prices, SQ ratings, product breadth, brand reputations, and so forth, and the extent to which your company was or was not outcompeted by rivals. When I was in business, I would have loved to have had the competitive intelligence report. Do you think we knew, especially for our non-publicly traded competitors, do you think we knew how much they were spending on advertising? No. Do you think we knew how much they were charging? No. In fact, that's one of the things as a sales guy I would do is try to figure out how much they were paying for my competitor's product. So I'd throw out numbers, and they would either laugh or they would be shocked, and then I could guess, try to figure out what my competitor was charging. Crafting a strategy to be competitively successful. So you got a lot of options here for crafting a strategy capable of producing good overall company performance and competing successfully in the global market for athletic footwear. So what we're going to see here, though, is that it doesn't really matter what strategy you choose. If you choose a strategy and you execute it well, you can succeed. So you could have a mediocre strategy and execute it well, and you'll do okay. If you have a great strategy and you execute it poorly, you will suck. And that's reality. There are some, I'll give you an example here of businesses. Applebee's. You guys been to Applebee's? It's a great concept, lousy in execution. I'll do even one further than that. There's this deli place. Oh, I forget the name of it now. Anyway, the food, if they would actually serve it at temperature, would be great. But everything they bring to you is room temperature. So you go in there and you order a meatball sandwich, and what do you get? Room temperature meatball sandwich. It would taste good if it were actually served warm. So they've got a good strategy. It's all execution that's lousy. No company can escape having the competitiveness of its strategy and the overall buyer appeal of its branded footwear tested against the competitiveness of the strategies employed by rivals and overall buyer appeal of rival brands, competitive factor by competitive factor and region by region. So one of the things that I see when people start playing the game, if a company is using a certain sort of strategy and they're doing quite well, what do you think all the other teams tend to do? They all close in. And we end up with what I call a knife fight in a phone booth. Do you guys know what a phone booth is? If you watch television from the 70s, we didn't have cell phones, so you'd like pull over and you get in this little glass box and you make a phone call, you have to put money in the phone. That's a phone booth. Now, I don't know if you've ever tried to kill anyone with a knife, but you have to pull way back and then give it a good thrust. They teach you that in the Coast Guard? Oh, wow. Well, so now you learned something additional, right? Okay, so this makes a knife fight in a phone booth a very difficult thing to do. Now, when you start getting all the competitors crowded up in one space in the market, they're tearing each other's eyes out. Wouldn't it be better for you to go somewhere else and compete in a different space with a different strategy? And so that's something else you're going to have to keep an eye out for. The hard reality is that in every decision round, you and your co-managers, like the management team of rival companies, are challenged to devise a strategy and exert sufficient effort on the relative competitive factors affecting online sales and wholesale sales to footwear retailers that enables your company to compete successfully against rivals to result in sufficiently profitable sales volumes, market shares, and revenues across the 4 market regions. Competition-based exercise where your company's management team competes head-to-head against other companies in your class. Now, not only, you guys will only be competing against people in our class, but every week when everybody runs their thing, then they report how you guys are going to be performing against everybody else that's playing the game. And more than once, I'm proud to say, we have had teams in the top 100 or in the top 10. And so we are perfectly capable here at Missouri State University of competing against people and winning. If your company's sales volume and revenues are disappointingly low in certain regions in a given decision round, then it's management's responsibility to adjust the company's strategy and levels of competitive effort to produce better competitive outcomes. So I got assigned to this machine shop in Louisiana, and the guy that was in charge, it wasn't doing well. And he showed me all these goals that he had for these different measures in the coming year. And I said, wow, I like your goals. How are you going to get there? And his response was, well, we're just hoping. Does that sound like an effective strategy? No. The effective strategy is to identify the problems, figure out what is the root cause, address the root cause, and then that hopefully will lead to the improvement. And that's the only place where the hope happens, is where you do the work and then you hope it works, right? So you need to look at this every time as soon as those numbers run. And by the way, it's going to run Sunday nights at 11:59, or it'll run on that night at 11:59 p.m. And then immediately thereafter, you will have access to see what happened and what everybody else did. Now, that also means that we don't have any late submissions. People are like, oh, we forgot to submit. And I'm like, tough luck. Here's what's going to happen if you don't submit changes. It'll resubmit what you did for the last year. And so that's going to be what you have for that decision round. So there are no redos and there are no late submissions. So just get it done. Okay. It's unwise for a competitively successful company to rest on its laurels because weak performing rivals can be expected to boost their competitive efforts and try to close a performance gap. I've seen this over and over again, where they have a first good 2 or 3 decision rounds and they're like, phew, we're great. And they just sit around and they're like, well, let's just let it roll. Do you think your competitors that are not doing so well are going to let it roll? No, they're going to be trying to improve. So we only had 3 television networks. I know this is dark ages stuff for you guys, but 3 television networks. And you could always guess who was going to have the best shows in the fall by who sucked worse last year. And let's explain why that is. If you're on top, are you nervous about changing things? If you're on top, you're nervous about, right? It's like, if it's not broke, don't fix it. Have you ever heard that? Right? So you just keep trotting out the same shows. But if you really suck, what can you do? Yeah, you can wipe your whole schedule clean. You can get rid of all your turds. And you can take some risks. So putting on shows that a successful network might not take a chance on. So for example, The Simpsons. Have you ever watched The Simpsons? The Simpsons started on Fox. Fox was our 4th network. Simpsons started on Fox. Well, why did it get a start on Fox? None of the other networks would have touched that thing. It's radioactive, which is kind of funny because Homer and whatnot. But because Fox was on bottom, they basically had nothing to lose. And so they were willing to throw the dice and stick with that. Now, assume Fox is the number 1 rated, or number 1 network. How likely are they going to be to A, dump The Simpsons, or B, try something risky and new? So these are things to think about. If just because you're on top doesn't mean you're going to stay there. So you have to be aware of the fact that people are going to try to come back. While achieving attractive sales volumes and revenues in the world's athletic footwear marketplace is necessary, it is not sufficient to produce the best profit outcomes. You guys understand about necessary and sufficient? You got to have it, but it's not enough. Now, when I have marketing people involved, marketing people love to talk about market share and sales volumes. I'm like, yeah, but we're not making any money on it. And so the market share is important, but if your costs are too high, you're going to be losing money. And what's the goal of financial management? Maximize shareholder wealth, and we're only going to do that if we're profitable. Let's see, for a company to rank among the industry's top performers, its net revenues must cover costs by an amount that results in profitability. Good profitability requires not only sufficient competitive success to produce attractively large revenues, but also consistent managerial success in operating the company cost efficiently. Operating inefficiencies and wasteful spending impair a company's profitability and overall performance. Where might you see wasteful spending? If people were throwing a lot of money at corporate social responsibility and just doing it for 1 year, that would be very much wasteful spending. Lots of other ways you can waste money. Don't waste time searching for some magic bullet or undefeatable strategy. It is conceptually impossible for there to be some pre-selected surefire strategy or some undefeatable combination of competitive efforts actions that is guaranteed to produce sufficient sales volumes, unit sales, market shares, and revenues to propel a company into the ranks of the top performing companies, irrespective of the strategies and competitive actions undertaken by rival companies. If you go out to YouTube, and you guys probably have already done this, and you say, best strategy for BSG, there undoubtedly will be some jackass who has made a video, and they're like, oh yeah, man, this is what I did, and we killed, right? Now, if that person were to run that same strategy again against a different group of competitors, would they be guaranteed to win? No, it probably says more about the weakness of his competition than it does about his strategy. Now, why do I tell you that? You know these AI models that I'm telling you to play around with? Where do you think they get their information? From the internet? And is it possible that they would have scooped up some of this garbage about there being a better strategy? Yeah. So that's one of the things that you've got to be careful. By the way, having AI is like having an intern. Some days you guys will be responsible for monitoring an intern. Should you assign a task to an intern and then they turn it in and you don't check it, you just give it to your boss? No. And AI is the same way. You need to stink test everything AI tells you, because if you look at it and you say, that doesn't make any sense, maybe AI is hallucinating. Or maybe it's basing that statement on some garbage it found on the internet. It's interesting, I forget what question I asked AI, and then I went to look at their citations, and it was all garbage. The places they were looking, and I went and checked, they were real citations, but they were, like someone wrote an opinion piece in the Ladies' Home Journal. Is that really something we should be basing scientific decisions on? Probably not. Okay. So we talked about the magic bullet. It's deeply flawed thinking to believe that some predetermined level of competitive effort will be could be built into the business strategy game that will always turn out to be competitively powerful enough to deliver great overall company performance, irrespective of the strategies, actions, and decisions of rivals. Even if we played this game a second time with the same teams, do you think the outcomes would be identical? Nope. Be very wary about following the advice of outside sources. That's what we just talked about. The most accurate and dependable source of information for guiding your efforts to compete successfully is always found in the competitive intelligence report you receive after every decision round. I want you to underline that and put a big star by it. Last semester, I had some people and they were doing poorly. And it turned out, not only were they not reading the competitive intelligence report, they didn't even know how to find their own reports. Do you think that that is a recipe for disaster? Absolutely. So now we're on to making decisions. There are 57 different types of decision entries and 10 entries involving assumptions about the competitive actions that rivals are likely to take. In some cases, entries for the same decision type, like selling price, advertising, or delivery times, are required for each of the 4 geographic regions in the world. Each of the decision pages displays the projected outcomes of your decision entries. First of all, 57, that's a lot of decisions to be making. And the sad thing is this is simplified from what would be going on in the real world. The second thing that I want you to note here is that projections are not guaranteed. So the projections are based on assumptions about what your competitors are going to do in the next round. If you don't change those yourself, then what happens is their last period's competitive effort is the estimate for the next period. Do you think they're not going to change anything? It's unlikely. And so those are just projections, and if you think they're going to up their advertising by 10% in the coming period, you need to go ahead and change that assumption, and that will help you to get better projections. But once again, projections are not guaranteed. And I always have students come to me, they're like, I don't understand, it looked like we were going to be profitable. That was a projection. If your competitor had done exactly what they did previously, then it would have been profitable, but you've been outcompeted, and so people didn't buy your shoes. Down at the bottom, the first time you visit a decision entry page, you should take time to explore and digest all the information. If you feel the need for assistance or additional information while you are working on a page, click the help button at the top right. Oh man, that is so helpful and useful. Hit the help button at the top right. In fact, I would tell you the first time that you find yourself on a page, hit the help button and read about it. It'll give you a much better idea than going out there and just try to poke in some numbers and see what happens. Totally ignoring help information is unwise. Underline that. And we've already talked about the next thing. I can't reset the round to allow for late submissions. Okay, so now we're on to talking about our workforce compensation and training. There are 6 different types of entries. On the first decision page, you're going to encounter how much to raise, lower the base pay of workers at each production facility, whether and how much to raise, lower each worker's incentive payment per pair produced, the dollar size of the fringe benefits package that the company will provide to production workers at each production facility, how much to spend on training workers in the use of best production practices at each facility, approximately what ratio of production workers to supervisors you want to have at each facility, and what percentage increase in salaries and benefits in grant to supervisors. The dollar size of the compensation package paid to production workers relative to the regional average directly affects worker productivity. So the more productive a worker is, the fewer workers you need. The fewer workers you need, the fewer workers you have to pay. And so what you want to do is find ways to make your workers more productive. Expenditures for best practices training have 4 highly positive benefits in all facilities. Number 1, they help curb the reject rates associated with defective workmanship. Remember we said that we've got the problem of the material that gets wasted, the labor that gets wasted, the throwing away of those things. Also, we have to remake the shoes, right? If someone was expecting those shoes, we have to remake them. Number 2, helping to improve SQ ratings for both branded and private label footwear. 3, curtailing materials waste and potentially lowering materials costs at the facility by as much as 20% annually. Do you think a 20% reduction in raw materials would be important? Oh yeah, most companies would kill for that. And 4, increasing worker productivity. Annual increases of 1% or more in worker productivity at the North American facility, where productivity is presently 5,000 pairs per worker per year, and at the Asia Pacific, where it's just under 3,500 pairs per worker per year, holds potential for meaningful savings in labor costs over time. All the benefits of current year spending for best practices training are reflected in the supporting calculations of productivity, materials costs, reject rates, and SQ ratings each time you change a decision entry, allowing you to evaluate the immediate cost effectiveness of such expenditures. Now, those impacts on productivity, except for the salary, is just dependent on what you're doing, right? You don't have to worry about the competitors. But why do we have to worry about the competitors when it comes to the compensation of the workers?
They have a higher relative compensation, and it's going to lower your productivity by taking away your best workers.
Oh, yeah. Okay, so we called this, when I worked in industry, we called it bright sizing. So we used to talk about layoffs, and then they started talking about right sizing, which was the same thing, only it sounded nicer, right? But then we started talking about bright sizing, and that's where the smart people get out. And when the smart people get out, do you know what you're left with? I'm going to teach you something very important today here. You're left with the cream of the crop. Who's going to stay? The biggest losers. Who's going to lose? Who's going to leave? The biggest winners. Does that make sense? And so you're left with the cream of the crop. So you definitely, and I've seen people do this before. They're like, screw those workers. I'm going to cut their pay. And then their productivity takes a nosedive, and they wonder why. Okay.
expenditures to achieve a comparatively low ratio of production workers per supervisor and pay supervisor personnel higher than average salaries also helps boost production worker productivity. Okay, so
If you have bad workers, do you need more supervisors or less? Yeah, you need more if you've got bad workers. So what we want to do is to try to create a situation where good workers want to work for us, and those workers are easier to supervise. Plus, we don't need as many workers, and so we end up with fewer supervisors because the workers are better, I hate to say better people, but they are. They're better people, and we have fewer of them. And I actually had a student one time, and he was amazed to see basically his fixed costs drop. And he figured out that his people had gotten so good that he didn't need as many supervisors anymore. And so it was actually dropping a number. So his people were so productive that he was able to reduce the size of his workforce. As a result, he had fewer supervisors. By the way, supervisors are a fixed cost, right? If we could get by with not having a supervisor, we would. The reason we have a supervisor is because it's cheaper to have one than to not. And so if we invest in the workers, then perhaps we need fewer supervisors. Factors that affect worker productivity. Annual base pay increases. Annual increases in base pay of 2% or more lead to higher levels of worker productivity, chiefly because higher pay scales help the company attract and retain workers with better skills and work habits. My last raise from the university was $600, spread over an entire year. Do you think that did anything to motivate me to be more productive? No. The maximum base pay increase in any 1 year is 15%. Cuts in base pay are allowed up to a maximum of 10% in any 1 year, but they tend to decrease worker productivity unless the base pay cut is offset with increased incentive payments. And we're going to talk about incentive payments next. But if you just go out there and cut the base pay and you don't do anything else for this people, you can see your productivity just go straight to hell. How much emphasis is placed on incentive compensation? The larger the percentage of total compensation that comes from piecework incentives, the larger the gain in worker productivity. However, the incremental gains in productivity become progressively smaller and top out altogether once incentive pay reaches 25% of total compensation. So you got your 25% incentive pay as a percentage of compensation. At first, as you raise that, it improves your productivity, but then it starts to plateau, and it becomes what we call asymptotic. Now, what does this mean? It means we have diminishing returns to doing more and more of this. So you might do a little bit, and you get a big old increase from here to here. You only did a little bit, and you get a big increase in productivity. But then as you move on, actually I've drawn that wrong, haven't I? No? Anyway, so long story short, you can put too much into this, and it's not going to do you any good. After 25%, you're basically just wasting your time and your money. Does that make sense? Okay, so diminishing returns to doing that sort of thing. The total annual compensation of workers relative to industry average compensation levels in the geographic region. So we are looking at our total annual compensation, and what does that include? Base salary plus incentives, plus the fringe benefits. It's how you compare to the average compensation level in your region. And it's so funny to watch socially conscious students try to play this game. Because what they want to do is they say, wow, our people in North America are getting paid $17 an hour. We should pay our people in Asia Pacific $17 an hour. Does that logic work? Mr. Bardwaj, you are from South Asia, is that correct? Do people in Indian factories expect to be paid the same wage American workers do? No. Do they have any shortage of workers even though they're paying less per hour? No. You've got, what, 1.5 billion people now? They're just thrilled to have a job, right? Now, by the way, people are like, oh, you shouldn't take advantage of them like that. Is it the best option in their life? Yeah. Oh, yeah. I mean, when you look at, so, by the way, I grew up on the farm. I didn't know if you guys knew that, but, and watching what happened on the farm, I was thrilled to be in a factory with air conditioning, right? Now, I'm sure there aren't that many air conditioning factories in India, but they're still thrilled not to be out walking behind a water buffalo and trying to plant whatever, right? So don't get sucked into this idea. There is the market determines the wage. And if you go in there and you start paying a much higher wage, you're basically going to destroy the labor market in that area. What will your competitors have to do? They're going to have to bump up their pay too if they want to compete with you. And then what happens to the profitability in that region? By the way, do you think people have more money or less money to spend in those regions? Less. And so, you know, we're paying our people less, but we're selling the shoes for less. Kind of makes sense, right? But if you're paying them American wages, can you sell the shoes at Indian prices? No. Okay. Special note. Worker productivity figures are projections. It can't be certainties because you don't know what your competitors are going to do, right? Because it's based on how you're working against the average. And in this case, the average is just one of your teams added to the other divided by 2. Then we have the amount that the company spends annually per worker on best practices training. Productivity benefits from spending progressively more dollars on training are subject to diminishing marginal returns, so similar idea here. In other words, the benefit of spending a second $500 per worker on best practices training are smaller than the first $500, and the benefits of spending the third $500 is less than the second, and so forth. If and when the resulting productivity gains become too small to justify spending additional sums in upcoming years, you can cut back spending on training without losing any of the previous built-up productivity. In other words, this is a cumulative thing. If you have invested in it, you get to keep it, you don't lose it. Now, I would tell you that that's not necessarily accurate, because in the real world, what happens to your workers?
Turnover.
Yeah, you get turnover. So you've got, let's assume everybody loves your company. People will still retire. People will still die in car accidents, right? And so that training that you put into them, you don't necessarily get to keep, but in the game you do. The number of models workers must assemble at a given facility. I also lost more than one to prison. So that's when you become a supervisor. One of the things you're going to have to keep in mind is, what do I do if John gets caught drunk driving again? I've got to have someone to back him up, right? Workforce productivity decreases as the number of models being assembled goes up. This is because somewhat different production assembly methods are used for different models. If you did the same thing every day, all day, would you get really good at it? Yeah. Now let's say I ask you now to do 2 things. Are you going to be as good at the second thing? No, because you're only spending half your time on it. Now what if I ask you to do 5 things? Do you see how you can easily get yourself into a situation where you're not good at doing any one particular thing? And so when you ask people to build these different models, you end up with somewhat of a similar situation where the more you're asking them to do, the less good they will be at it. Let's see, where were we at? Higher supervisor salaries relative to the regional average. Now we know that there are different calibers of workers. Do you think there are different calibers of supervisors? Oh yeah. And if you are willing to pay more, then you can have better supervisors. But if you are paying the least, what are you left with? I've actually seen supervisors that we would have been better off just to have let the people go feral and work on their, do you guys know what feral is? Like where you take a tame animal and it becomes wild, it's feral. We'd have actually been better off to let some of these people manage themselves than to have these supervisors. That's who you get stuck with if you're paying your supervisors crap. A smaller ratio of production workers to supervisors. The fewer workers that supervisory staff are assigned to supervisors, the better able they are to quickly correct sloppy assembly practices and lax worker attention to detail. Have you guys ever seen these old circus acts where they're spinning plates on poles? And that's what being a supervisor is like. Every person that works for you is like a plate that you're trying to keep spinning on a pole. And you have to keep going around and put more and more spin on these things to keep them spinning. I could probably keep 6 plates spinning. Do you think I could keep 12 plates spinning? It's going to be a hell of a lot harder than 6, right? And by the way, we know that humans tend to behave better when they are being watched. Is that a true or false statement? Yeah, you guys already did discussion 1, right? Those cameras at Walmart, are they there because people are naturally well behaved? No. And so having a supervisor around, when I got back from vacation one time, I asked my guys, I said, well, how was it when I was gone? And one of them said, oh, it was great. They said we were able to relax. That made my freaking day, right? Because I knew then that I was providing value with keeping them on their toes, keeping them productive, keeping them from slacking off. By the way, left to their own devices, will production workers just like run the machine and make things happy? And no. You'll see a lot of reading of dirty magazines and a lot of standing around talking and then horseplay and things like that. So supervision is important. The use of new equipment as opposed to refurbished equipment, even if the refurbished equipment has been recently purchased. New equipment is more productive than refurbished equipment. By the way, one of the factories that you're going to get started with has some equipment that is going to die after a certain amount of time. And if you don't manage to replace that equipment, do you know how many shoes you're going to be able to make? 0, right? And it's so funny every time, hopefully not this time, but every time there's a team, they're like, wow, we didn't realize our machines were dying, and then we weren't able to ship anything out of Latin America or wherever it is. And suddenly someone says, hey, wait a minute, we don't have any machines. So it's something you got to keep an eye on. Whether production improvement option D has been installed at the facility. So that option increases worker productivity by 50%. And we'll discuss what these improvement options are. Yes?
I was going to ask, is there a number or a ratio we're going to get somewhere to compare new equipment to refurbished so we can do math?
Oh, okay. I would, on that page where you're selecting, hit the help button, and the latest numbers hopefully should be there.
For the new equipment, so if you already have new equipment installed and say 5 years later you replace it with new equipment again, is there a productivity increase from that or is it the same?
Ooh, that's a good question. So I would imagine there's a productivity increase there, but I would also tell you it's probably not cost benefit smart, right? My car is 8 years old. You think I'm planning to replace? No, it works fine, right? And so the machinery, I would only replace it when it wears out.
Okay.
Now, in the real world, what happens is we start to see that as machines wear out, they start to produce more scrap, they start to have higher downtimes, and they start to have higher maintenance amounts. And then then it becomes more of a judgment call. But in the game, as long as that machine's running, I wouldn't mess with it. Let's see, there's reason to believe that over the next several years, worker productivity can be substantially improved at both facilities if managers aggressively pursue productivity gains. Worker productivity is important because it determines the size of the workforce needed to staff the facility operations. The bigger the workforce, the more money you spend. Okay, now we're on to branded footwear production.
There are 5 types of decision entries involved in producing branded footwear. Number 1, the percentage of superior materials used. Number 2, number of model styles to be produced. Number 3, how much to spend on enhancing styling features for each model style. Number 4, how much to spend on TQM Six Sigma programs. And number 5, the number of branded pairs to be manufactured. These 5 decision categories are fairly straightforward, but you can click the help for additional details, but you need to keep these following things in mind. Number 1, there is some degree of uncertainty about prices for the standard and superior materials in the current year. And the reason that is, if you both decide to go all in for superior materials, the cost of superior materials is going to go up, the cost of standard materials will go down. If one of you decides to go all superior and the other one decides to go all standard, then probably the prices won't change any. Shifting prices for standard and superior materials which are not known in advance cause actual costs for materials to differ up or down from the projected materials cost shown on the page. This is another reason that that profit number is just a projection, because we don't know what our true costs are going to be. You can immediately see the impact in a company's SQ ratings when you enter decisions for superior materials usage, expenditures for enhanced styling and features, and the expenditures for TQM Six Sigma. In other words, this is not a projection. This can be known with certainty. And so even if you walk out of this decision process and not know what your profit's going to be, you can know with certainty what your SQ rating is going to be. The benefits of progressively higher expenditures on styling features TQM Six Sigma programs are subject to diminishing marginal returns. In other words, incremental gains, and it's the same story as before. That first bit of money you spend gains you a lot. The second bit of money gains you a little less. And the third bit of money, same amount, gets you even less. And so if you've got, let's say, 5 things that I can do to boost SQ, should I put all my money on one of them? No, I want to spread that out. And that way I'm getting that big boost, that big first boost from all of those things. And so don't just go all in on superior materials or all in on TQM Six Sigma. You need to spread the love around, and that's how you're going to get the biggest boost in SQ for the money. And by the way, you can play around with these things, right? You can change your inputs, and you can watch your cost, and you can watch that SQ rating. And you can figure out how to get the very best SQ rating you can, or the SQ rating you desire for the least amount of money. The amount of the company's cumulative spending for TQM Six Sigma programs over a period of years has a bigger impact than current spending. So this is similar to corporate social responsibility. It's one of those things where you have to keep after it to make it work. Now, it's different than corporate social responsibility in that it's actually going to impact your SQ rating. And so I would tell you, if you were to choose between corporate social responsibility or TQM Six Sigma, you would definitely want to go with the TQM Six Sigma, because that's going to improve your SQ rating, and that's going to improve your image rating. And so you could take that same amount of money and spend it on corporate social responsibility, and you wouldn't get the same benefit out of it. Some combinations entail lower cost per pair than others. We've already talked about that for the SQ rating. In deciding how many branded models and styles to include in your company's product line, you need to be alert to the costs associated with changing the production line from making one model or style to another. Are you guys familiar with setup and teardown? So when you have a production line, if you're making the same thing over and over again, like Henry Ford and the Model T, there's only one setup, and that's at the beginning we set the machines to make the Model T, and then we go with it. And after that, basically, we're just producing the whole time unless it's down for maintenance. However, if you're making different stuff, then you have to change out the tools on the machines. For example, the business that I was in, we were making 1 to 3 of something. And so we had a lot of setup and teardown. That costs money. It costs you your labor money, and it also costs you time, because you could have been producing something else, but instead you've got the machine torn apart and you're putting it together for a different thing.
And so what we're saying here is the more of these models that you've got, the higher your setup costs are going to be.
To switch production over from one model to another takes anywhere from 2 to 5 hours of setup time, depending on the styling features of the various model styles, and is usually done between each day's work shifts. And so, fortunately, at least we're not losing production over it. Annual production run setup costs per facility for branded footwear are $1 million for 50 models, $2 million for 100 models, $3.25 million for 150 models, $4.5 million for 200 models, $6 million for 250 models, $7.5 million for 300 models, and $9 million for 350 models. Let's do something interesting here. Let's compare the 300 model, $7.5 million, versus the 150 at 3.25. 3.25 times 2 is how much?
6.5.
6.5, which is less than the 7.5 that we're getting charged over here for 300 models. What does this mean? It means that it's not a linear relationship, right? That setup cost gets higher per model the more you throw on the fire. Does that make sense? And so it might not make sense to go all the way out there to 500 models. What can you achieve with 300 models that you can't achieve with 500 models? Play around with it and find out. Broadening your company's product line with more models can have a strongly positive effect on unit sales and market share, but the sales enhancing effect of more models also carries a potentially sizable impact on the production cost per pair. If a major element of your company strategy is to have a broad product line, you can combat the added cost per pair associated with production run setup by investing in production improvement, option B, that reduces production setup cost by 50%, and or by expanding a production facility. And so with these options that we're talking about here, you're going to have to figure out, given your strategy, which ones are best for you. I think worker productivity is a good one regardless. If you're going to do a high number of models, this option B probably makes a lot of sense. Factors that determine reject rates. You know, I'll tell you what, I think we'll start there next time. Any questions?
Do you lose the benefits of the option when you get new machines or new equipment?
I think the option is with the factory, not with the equipment.
Okay, so you don't lose it once you purchase.
That's my understanding.
Okay.
Now, the other thing that's interesting about the business strategy game, these people that are listed as the authors, if you reach out to tech support and ask a question like that, one of the authors actually will respond to you, usually within 24 hours, and they'll tell you exactly the answer to your questions. And so one of the competitive advantages your team might have is the fact that you're willing to reach out to these people and ask questions. Of course, you can also check the help page. Might be some information there too.